This is going to be practice 2. This is a balance sheet. So this is the 2011. You guys did the long essay last week. There's the long essay there. That's the one you did. We're skipping number 2, and the reason being is, check it out, right? You got exchange rates going on. That's Unit 6 stuff. That's not, right? They're saying that's not going to be on the test. Again, we'll have the specifics on April 3rd. Okay, so I thought we'd do a balance sheet today. We're going to do another long essay for AP Macro Practice 3. All right, you can see the balance sheet here. If you haven't done this yet, go do it, right? By doing it and then by looking at me explain it, that's going to help you much more if you just sit here and watch me explain this stuff. All right, based on Sewell Bank's balance sheet, calculate the required reserve ratio. Well, you can eyeball it and just look at it and say, okay, well, 2,000 is 20% of 10,000, which is the demand deposit, so 20%. However, the College Board may want to see you show your work. Again, how are you guys going to do that if you're on a computer? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. 2,000 divided by 10,000 times 100 gives you 20%. That's how you would set it up by showing your work. All right, that's pretty easy. Suppose the Federal Reserve purchases $5,000 worth of bonds from Sewell Bank. What will be the change in the dollar value of each of the following immediately after the purchase? Okay, excess reserves. Well, when the Fed comes in and buys $5,000 worth of their bonds, okay, so this is going to become $2,000 because $5,000 worth of bonds is leaving the bank. It's going to the Fed. What the Fed is going to give them is money, and that money for those bonds, that $5,000, is going to go into excess reserves. So your excess reserves becomes $5,000, okay? What's going to happen to demand deposits? Well, nothing in that transaction is going to impact demand deposits, so there's no change to your demand deposits, okay? C says calculate the maximum amount the money supply can change as a result of the $5,000 purchase of bonds by the Fed. So in other words, now this bank has $5,000 in excess reserves. They can loan all that out. This is that money multiplier. All right. So 1 over 0.2, right? That's the required reserve. 1 over the required reserve of 0.2 equals 5. 5 times 5,000 can be loaned out means that there can be a $25,000 increase is the maximum amount money supply can change. All right. Again, how'd I get that? I know the required reserve is 20%. 1 over 0.2 is 5. Now I've got my money multiplier. 5 times all of that 5,000 can be loaned out. $25,000 increase is the maximum amount the money supply can change. All right. If it was a demand deposit, then you got to take out the required reserve and then get your money multiplier, and then you end up with a different amount. But when it's the Fed buying bonds, all of it can be loaned out because all of it's going to end up in excess reserves. I hope that makes sense. When the Federal Reserve purchases bonds, what will happen to the price of bonds in the open market? Well, just remember, when they buy bonds, that's going to impact the interest rate, right? Interest rates are going to go down. Buy bonds, big money, interest rate goes down. Think of that money market graph. When the Fed buys bonds, the interest rates will decrease. Remember, the price of bonds and interest rates have an inverse relationship between each other. When interest rates decrease, the price of previously issued bonds will increase because they have a higher interest rate, right? So all those bonds that carried an interest rate before this Fed action had a higher interest rate. The Fed bought bonds. That means these new bonds, right, have a lower interest rate. So those old bonds are attractive to investors. Price is going to go up for those old bonds that have that higher interest rate, all right? Key thing to remember there, though, if you don't understand all that, just remember that inverse relationship between interest rates and the price of bonds, okay? Suppose that instead of the purchase of bonds by the Federal Reserve, an individual deposits $5,000 of cash into their checking account. What is the immediate effect of the cash deposit on the M1 measure of the money supply? All right, well, what is M1 money? It's cash, it's traveler's checks. I highly doubt that would ever come into play, and it's checking accounts, all right? If you take cash and you put it in a checking account, it is still M1 money. So there's no change. No change. Cash is M1, as is checking accounts. Therefore, no change to M1 measure of the money supply. All right, that's it today.